Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. Welcome to the show. Need to give a shout out at the start of the show to our new sponsor, Nexo. Yes, indeed. Are you ready to grow your wealth with the world's leading digital assets institution, Nexo? I hope so. Did you know you can earn up to 12% on your digital assets with Nexo's high yield savings account? So treat yourself. Treat your crypto, treat your fiat with the world's industry best crypto and fiat services featuring compounding interest, which is paid out daily. There's 18 available cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, a whole bunch of stable coins and more. And there are 3 fiat currencies accepted. The pound, the euro, USD, and I think there's up to $375 million worth of insurance available on custodial assets. You can top up and make withdrawals at any time, and there are 0 fees for using the Nexo Earn Suite. Want to learn more? Of course you do. Just go to nexo.io, and that of course is spelled NEXO.io. And now it is on with the show. My guest today is Matthew Graham. Matthew is the CEO of Sino Global Capital, an investment firm based in China that invests in decentralized technologies that have a strategic connection to the mainland Chinese market. Hey, welcome back to the show, Matthew.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here today, Andy.
Great to have you. Yeah, great to have you back, Matthew. I think, the last time or the first time you were on the show, I did have a look, and it was early January 2020, really just a month or so before the pandemic hit. And well, it's been a little bit of a wild ride since then, right?
Sure has. That's why I wasn't able to go to Miami this week, because we're still dealing with some of the implications here. I would have had to do a 2 or 3 week quarantine on the way back. So it's really still quite difficult for international travel.
Yeah, look, it sure is. So, well, I thought today would be a good opportunity for you and me just to kind of catch up. It'd be good to get your read on, what you think is happening in the crypto markets. We can talk about our shared FOMO for not being in Miami. And of course, would love to get your take on, I guess, the mixed signals that we've been getting out of China, right?
Sure thing.
Well, to begin with, just for the benefit of anyone who perhaps haven't heard our first show and maybe isn't familiar with you, I think, most people probably are familiar with who you are now, but please just introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background and your personal story.
Sure thing. So my background is TradFi, but with a China specialty, so representing international technology companies in mainland China for strategic partnership and investing. But for several years now, we've been investing in the blockchain space as Sino Global Capital. And our basic model is this: we invest in best blockchain projects all around the world, projects like Solana and Serum, and we help them build out mainland China, which arguably is the most important market in crypto. Certainly, we've seen it's a big one in recent weeks with the impact it's had on the market. And for even best of breed international projects, it's really quite a difficult market to succeed in. So we have a team of China experts, half international, half Chinese, half based in China, half based internationally. And but we're able to provide a full suite of services for helping our portfolio companies here in mainland China, and it's proven to be a very successful model because it's highly differentiated and it's something people really need.
Fantastic. And so we'll talk more about China soon and some of your investments. But I thought to begin with, maybe, given that the markets have been super volatile over the last 2 to 3 weeks. So I'd love to just kind of touch on some of the things that have happened, some of the data points, if you will, and just kind of get your candid opinion on what you think may or may not have happened. And look, it seems a little bit redundant to talk too much about Elon Musk. I'm sure everyone's a little bit sick of Elon, but it kind of did start with Elon back on May 13 with his by now infamous tweet that Tesla would no longer accept Bitcoin for the purchase of Teslas, and the markets have obviously been down since then. There's lots of other factors involved. But let's start there. Any thoughts yourself on kind of, what Elon was thinking there and what the background might be?
Well, I mean, in terms of what Elon is thinking, I think he gets kind of a kick out of this, frankly. I think he likes having the market impact that he does. And he's not really allowed to do that in TradFi anymore. Ever since his taking Tesla private at 420 tweet, he's still able to do a couple things here and there, but really the SEC is monitoring him. That's a true statement, right? So now he's kind of taking his act to crypto. And I think that's really quite unfortunate. I don't like it at all. But I think that it's quite clear that the narrative that's been at the center of the bull market in Bitcoin, especially, has been institutional, Western institutional in particular, coming to the table. And so Elon's comments certainly punctured some of that enthusiasm, some of that optimism that would continue to take place. First of all, regarding his comments about using Bitcoin for purchasing Tesla, but I think even more so with respect to his comments about Bitcoin maybe not being as environmentally friendly as we would like it to be, because that's something that could be a serious concern for companies that are looking to, for listed companies that are looking to purchase Bitcoin with Treasury. The last thing an S&P 500 listed company would want is to be taking flack for having Bitcoin assets and they're not environmentally friendly. So certainly that was for sure what kicked it off. But then obviously we've had a lot of China things at the table as well. And additionally, I think there was a lot of over leveraging. There was some froth and excessive leverage in the market. And so that always makes for an easy path to the downside.
Yes, it certainly does. Well, against, I guess the backdrop here is, this kind of meta narrative as to how green or non-green the kind of global Bitcoin mining ecosystem is, right? And so much of this is obviously tied to China. But just before we talk about China, what did you think of this idea, following Elon's tweet? Then, Michael Saylor, God bless him, I guess, was able to get Elon effectively to the table, right, in terms of getting him to talk with some of the North American miners, and they had this, whether it's a backdoor discussion or not, it doesn't really matter, but they've talked about setting up this Bitcoin mining council, right, which on the face of it seems like a good thing if it can kind of promote or slowly help smooth out the transition to a greener mining ecosystem. But what's your take on that mining council?
So I suppose with the mining council, I don't really have strong feelings one way or another. I suppose it depends on what the underlying intent is. I'm a little skeptical of that when it comes to Musk, because I think he's a little bit of a LARPer, frankly. But I'm keeping an open mind. I'm not super enthusiastic about it. I'm not opposed to it either. There's a lot of irony, certainly, with Bitcoin and its decentralized ethos having come full circle in some ways. But I take a very open-minded approach with things like with things like this.
Yeah, I think that's very sensible, and I think you have to take people at their word and just hope that they have good intentions for the meantime. We'll see how that plays out. Well, okay, let's just switch gears to China.
Yeah, I'm about it. I'm skeptical about it. I'm just willing to be open. To be clear, I'm willing.
Absolutely, and look, I agree with that too. Well, so China, in one sense, Matthew, it's just kind of it's amazing how this kind of the China FUD, if you like, it happens year after year or cycle after cycle, right? I'm sure, and you're more aware of this than anyone, but from the outside. So what seems to have happened in recent weeks is there were these proclamations from the Chinese authorities that led to this perception that perhaps some of the bigger Chinese mining companies, particularly in Sichuan and Inner Mongolia, were potentially looking to move out of that region because of these statements, and there was concern that the hash rate would drop. But that hasn't quite played out, and of course, there's always so much nuance to these things. So, would love to get your perspective on what you think is really happening at the moment with China. So let's start with the mining stuff.
Sure. So I think as backdrop, it's important to understand that many Chinese miners were already in a process where they were moving some capacity international to begin with. So I think that's important as backdrop. Also, in terms of discussions about hash rate, it's important to understand that this is a period of time when there's a seasonal migration to Sichuan because of the hydropower electricity. So there's a lot of things going on with the hash rate to begin with during this period of time for seasonal reasons. So I think all these are important contextually when you start looking at hash rate and when you start looking at potential implications of policy, things like that. The next thing, the reason I'm emphasizing context is because I think this is one of the major issues with news that comes out of China. It's very difficult for international observers to put everything into the proper context, and that's where people end up with takeaways that are very extreme compared to the reality on the ground. So the next piece of contextual information that I think is super, super important is understanding the vice president level news that came out. It was part of a routine meeting, and it was basically meeting minutes. You could think of it as that. And it was a meeting with respect to financial stability, not something specifically about crypto. So we all work in crypto, right? And we're putting ourselves at the center of the story, but we're not at the center of the story in actuality. So in actuality, the Chinese government is concerned about overall financial market stability and retail speculation. That's the big picture story, not something specific to crypto. So then crypto is a very small part actually of this much greater story. And that is seen very clearly in the fact that it was 2 or 3 sentences out of a larger meeting minutes. So I think you really got to put some of these things into context. The Chinese government, for sure, is very concerned about financial stability, retail speculation, things like that. And to the extent that crypto becomes related to that, then they're also going to be taking a close look at it, for sure. And so I think what is on the trading side, I think it's likely that, and we're already starting to see this, it's likely that there will be a clampdown on futures trading, leverage trading, and things like that for retail. But that's very different than spot purchases and stuff and such. So all these things have to be put into context, I think. It's our view that mining will not be outright banned across the country. That seems like a very low probability scenario. It's likely that different types of illegal Bitcoin mining, effectively siphoning off electricity from the power grid or things that don't conform to environmental standards, things like that, they're going to get cracked down on. It's a question of kind of moving the red lines around, but that's very different than these extreme scenarios that were being discussed about banning Bitcoin mining or banning retail trading and things like that. You got to put everything into context.
Yes, Matthew. And look, you put out a couple of really concise but quite pertinent tweets on this. And look, you didn't say who your source was on this, but you sort of alluded to it as well when you said that crypto people, they tend to kind of, well, we tend to put ourselves at the core of the picture when, as you've kind of pointed out, from the, I guess, the Chinese authorities' point of view, they're much more interested in just maintaining this semblance of discipline and control, whether it's over the population or over the capital, and just maybe protecting people from the volatile swings of the kind of the spot markets and the futures markets. But really, they're just more interested in maintaining the status quo going forward, right?
Sure. So we do a lot of triangulating of information because it is very difficult, in fairness, to interpret Chinese policy announcements and priorities, especially in their early stage. So we do a lot of triangulating, and so we did have one specific source of information that we thought was a good summary and did a great job of tying things together. So yeah, we kind of pushed that out as a way of as a helpful explainer for international audiences. Because we had a lot of different pieces of information, but we had one that kind of covered most of the key points. But yeah, so absolutely, contextual knowledge is extremely important, and you have to understand what the actual Chinese government priorities are, not just what's stated, but what is motivating statements. And so, for example, the Chinese government is extremely motivated by anything related to fiat on and off ramp. So it's not a free floating currency, obviously, like the United States dollar. The renminbi is not free floating. There's the offshore renminbi, there's the onshore renminbi, there's very strict currency controls. This is something that is enormously important to the mainland China government. And so anything that touches on that is going to be very sensitive. Fiat on and off ramp, or even potentially using Bitcoin mining activities as an end around to effectively get money offshore. And then the next thing that is sensitive is anything involving money laundering or tax evasion. Obviously, is going to be very sensitive, as it is to any government. But then the third thing is the Chinese government is extremely sensitive to excessive retail speculation. News of this only occasionally gets overseas, and it tends to be with enormous operations like what was it called, Plus One. The name's escaping me, but you only hear about the big ones. But the fact is that these MLM style or Ponzi style crypto schemes are very common in China, I think it's fair to say, and they can kind of metastasize almost overnight. What that means is that you very quickly can have, especially in a specific region, it's often the case, you can have suddenly tens of thousands of people that are part of one of these MLM or crypto operations. And when it falls to pieces, as it inevitably does, then all of a sudden that's a potential source of retail unrest. You could have a fairly large amount of pissed off people in a small geographic region at one time, potentially mobilizing. So the Chinese government is extremely sensitive to these kinds of things, and we should keep that in mind as a kind of starting point for trying to interpret what the actual impetus for policy pronouncements is, and that can help us put assign a probability to various potential outcomes.
And just to finish off on I guess the China stuff, Matthew, what's the latest in terms of your understanding of the DCEP, the digital currency electronic payment system? I just saw reported, I think yesterday, that the Chinese government is launching another digital lottery to stimulate its ongoing digital currency trials, and this time they're doing it in in Beijing. And as I understand it, they've done these kind of red envelope style digital currency lotteries in a few different places in China. But we've been hearing about this for, you know, a number of years now, almost. How's that all progressing, do you think?
Sure. So it continues to basically be a slow, steady progression. So you're absolutely right. It's something that has been in the works for literally several years now, maybe even 4 or 5. I'd have to check that. But this has been a long journey, and it started with an R&D process, research process, and now we're getting to the live trial stage in the field, and so this is definitely going to happen, and it's moving as kind of an inexorable process, step by step. Where it gets interesting, I think, is, and some of the open questions are how ultimately the Chinese government will incentivize usage of what's now called ECNY. From a consumer standpoint, from the Chinese government standpoint, of course, there are many advantages, but from a consumer standpoint, it looks and feels very similar to the ubiquitous Alipay or Tencent's WeChat Pay. So they're going to have to figure out a way to get people to use this in lieu of, again, Alipay, Tencent's WeChat Pay. In the past, the Chinese government, though, has been actually quite creative in incentivizing usage of what they want consumers to be picking up on. To give a great example of that, there was a major issue with lack of compliance with tax receipts, which in China are called FUD. And so this was a major problem for many, many years. But eventually, what the Chinese government decided to do to incentivize compliance is they actually have, again, a lottery system. And so on your official receipt, they have a scratch off where you can win actually all kinds of different prizes, some of them very small, but some of them, you know, things that people actually want, like the equivalent of like a Roomba or, you know, some perfume or something like that. So it's actually been enormously successful in increasing compliance with the FAPI, the tax receipt system. We can anticipate that the Chinese government will be similarly creative in terms of getting people to use ECNY as an alternative to Alipay and WeChat Pay, but we don't know the details on that yet. So that's one of the more interesting open questions in my opinion.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, we'll just keep an eye on this, and look, I guess the wheels or it's a slow process, but it's going to happen. So we'll watch with interest. But well, let's go to a very quick break, Matthew, and then we'll come back and we'll start to talk about some fun stuff. We're going to talk about some memes, Miami. We'll talk about some of your investments at Sino Capital as well. Back in 1 second. All right, well, we are back, and we are with Matthew Graham from Sino Global Capital. Matthew, I said we'd talk about some fun stuff and your investments, but yeah, one of the things that's interesting about you, Matthew, is in the last year or so, you know, it's been quite fascinating to watch your Twitter presence, if you like. You've sort of embraced I guess you know, crypto Twitter's meme culture to the point that, you know, you're almost one of the kind of the, you know, the leading meme artists or the leading a subject of memes, right? So yeah, what's is that surprising to you?
So I started tweeting kind of like for me. I didn't really think about it too much. I just, you know, it wasn't like a planned thing.
No.
Initially, it was just I just started tweeting. I had no concept that people were going to follow or read what I was writing. I was just doing it for me, and in most ways, I still do that. But with that said, I do think that crypto is not like TradFi in the sense that it is extremely social at its very core. And I think that extends to many different facets of crypto, including VC. And I think it would be foolish for a VC to not think of themselves as having a brand, if not as an individual, certainly as a company. And I think there are some big advantages to having this kind of presence. I think the investment will only get more social, even at the institutional, including VC level, in my view. And so that's kind of my general view. And then specifically, it quickly became apparent that it could be an enormously beneficial tool in terms of we've hired people that came about from our Twitter presence, my Twitter presence. We've gotten deals that way. We've made extremely valuable connections. So initially, it wasn't really a planned thing, and I still very much do it for me. But it for sure has enormous benefits for Sino.
I saw you, I'm not sure where I read this, it must have been one of your tweets, but you said something like, I used to be a very uptight, strictly suit and tie guy, and now look at my profile photo, shake my head, and you know.
That's true. And, you know, so look, you can tell by my body language, I'm a very intense person, for sure. But I have loosened up in some respects. I'm in a t-shirt today. I'm shit posting on Twitter. You know, you gotta lean into it to some extent, because I think that's the nature of what we are doing here in the crypto industry. I think it's core to the culture. So, you know.
I agree, Matthew, but just to play devil's advocate with you slightly, you know, how is this different to what Elon does, right? Because if we talk about, you know, crypto Twitter perhaps does openly embrace meme culture, and look, you've said yourself that has been of benefit to you and your business, but Elon is kind of doing the same thing, right?
I'm not sure I'd agree with that, actually. So superficially, sure, but I think that as with, it's almost like a type of technology, right? The memes and such. It's like a social. Look, the point I'm trying to make is I think many things can be done in both a pro-social and an anti-social way. And so I fundamentally think Elon's shit posts tend to be very manipulative and unserious, such as using his station to promote Doge at the expense of a lot of other things. I think there's a way to do it in a pro-social, and also a way to do it in an anti-social way. I think there's subtlety to this. You can do it in a deeper way, or you can just be LARPing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, you mentioned Doge. So funnily enough, you know, Elon has effectively memed Doge right back into almost a top 5 crypto asset, and to the point where Coinbase Pro and Coinbase itself today are just pumping Doge all over their Twitter feeds because they have listed Doge. Yeah, strange times.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, it's hard to hate on Doge. I'm just a little bit concerned that there's the potential, as I think we've already seen, for large numbers of retail investors to be following Elon, and you know, potentially they could get hurt. That's a concern. Also, I really would prefer him to focus on things that are more serious. But you know, I see him as kind of a LARPer, frankly.
Sure.
Contrast with Mark Cuban, right? Mark Cuban also obviously a really fucking fun guy, right? As fun as any investor on the planet. And if you listen to him talk about DeFi, it's instantly clear that he has done his homework and he really, really gets it. And if you contrast, now I understand that Mark Cuban is not running Tesla and SpaceX, but he's also a pretty fucking busy guy. And he's gone about it in a way that is still fun, but it's extremely serious. So I think that could be, my suggestion is that could be a contrast, that those two examples show quite a contrast, and demonstrate a way to do it in the right way. And conversely, what I would view as a LARPing kind of way.
Yeah, fair enough, Matthew. Well, Miami, right? So we mentioned Miami, and anyone who is watching or listening to this and, deep in crypto and not in Miami is probably feeling a little bit of FOMO at the moment, as we see, the photos and videos and so on Twitter. What do you think is it's kind of a strange one, right? Because it is this sort of first big crypto conference post-pandemic. Not that we are post-pandemic, but right on cue, Bitcoin seems to have made a little mini recovery just in the last 24 hours or so as the conference began, right?
Sure. So I'm not really a big conference person. I definitely would have gone to this one if it weren't for the quarantine procedures that would have hit me on the way back to China. But in general, I kind of hate conferences. But look, it's the first big conference hopefully coming out of COVID days. So it was a really big deal, certainly, excuse me, in that regard. So yeah, I'm definitely FOMOing a little bit. Plus, everyone's finding out is SizeChad real or not. It looks like people are having a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to ask you about that, Matthew. If we just need to cover off kind of one of the key crypto Twitter memes of the moment, and it is so tied into Bitcoin Miami. I have seen it, but I don't quite understand it. So what is SizeChad, as you understand it?
Well, by the way, I became friends with him. I'm not even sure how that happened, but so SizeChad is a friend who happens to be an enormous guy. I mean, he's just a big guy, just enormous. So to the point where he's so enormous that it's like there's no way he's like a fucking giant. That can't be real. So people were a lot of people in Twitter hide behind avatars, and they have weird personas and things like that. So I think people were half joking, saying, there's no way this guy could be real. He looks like the world's most fun, enormous giant. This can't possibly be a real person. So I think people were making a lot of jokes about that.
Yeah, he looks like a kind of a cross between, well, a Chad from the meme and, Brian from the Doge meme, and with a bit of Larry from the block, perhaps. But
yeah. Well, Larry's another giant in a different way, though.
Indeed.
Larry's
yes, indeed.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting about Miami, I guess, Matthew, is, the background is, the mayor of Miami, I think his name is Francis Suarez. I hope I've got that name right. But,
yeah.
and this kind of movement, a little bit of I don't know if it's a narrative or how real it is. There's probably some truth to it. The kind of the exodus from Silicon Valley to cities like Miami and Austin, right? Do you think that's is Miami the next startup city, as Balaji would say?
Well, there's definitely truth to the fact that some Silicon Valley youth and tech people following them are definitely moving to Miami. That's for sure something true. Founders Fund, Boys, a lot of people in that circle are moving to Miami. Definitely true. And so to some extent, that is in crypto as well. Maybe a little bit skeptical about how long-term that will be. Possibly the romance might be short-lived with, I think we've seen with all the shootings in Miami in the last couple of weeks that Miami has its own issues. But I think the mayor of Miami has done a great PR job for sure in attracting attracting that kind of talent and creating a lot of buzz. He's certainly done a tremendous job with that regard.
Yes, he has. Okay, will be interesting to watch all that play out as well. As we start to finish off, I'd love to get your thoughts, Matthew, on anything you're prepared to share in terms of what are some of the, I guess, the public facing investments that you guys at Sino Capital are sort of focused on and why, I guess.
Sure. Well, of course, we continue to make a lot of investments in the Solana ecosystem, but we're definitely not Solana bankies. So we recently invested in Zapper as well, which obviously is a tremendous property. I think we really have a bottom-up approach. We look for teams that we have high trust in and confidence in their tech ability and business acumen. And then the next question we ask is, are these people that we want to be hanging out with potentially for years? Because we're long-term investors. We really take quite a different approach. It's not about like, let's look at the token waterfall so we figure out if we can fucking dump on retail 3 months from now or whatever. That's just not what we do. We look for, is this someone like Toli from Solana or Sam from FTX, who we think are fucking rock stars, and also, by the way, we trust them. And so then, if it's that type of person, then what could be better than backing them and supporting them and growing with them, for the long term? That's really what we look to do.
Yeah, I mean, well, speaking of Sam and FTX, they've really been one of the success stories in recent months, right? What do you attribute that? And you're backers, right? You're investors.
So I think FTX, they're just ultimate executors. I think it's just obviously the whole team is brilliant, but additionally, they are just awesome at blocking and tackling. They go to enormous lengths to get all the details right. And they combine that with their brilliance in terms of being able to see the big picture. They just do really everything right, A to Z. Sam has also built an amazing culture at FTX. I just think they're just absolute all-stars. And I think they're going to be an enormous force in the industry for years to come. 5 years from now, they will be an even bigger part of the story than they are today, for sure. They're going to be just enormous, frankly.
Yes, and look, one of the things I like about you, Matthew, is you're not afraid to tell it like it is, even from your perspective. So you'll publicly back people like Sam and FTX, but if there's something that you're not happy with, you'll call it out. And I guess I'm speaking specifically of BitClout, right? So.
BitClout.
What's your beef with BitClout?
So look, we have friends that invested in BitClout, and we know some of the people. But I would phrase it the starting point is the idea itself actually really does for sure have aspects that are brilliant. There was the potential to do this in the right way, but to have a decentralized social network, a Twitter alternative powered by crypto, you could have done this in a way that was both brilliant and just fucking cool. That's not what happened though. The brilliant idea, I think has, in my view, has been executed in a way that represents the worst of Silicon Valley thinking. And so there are a lot of things that just were sketchy about it. The scraping user profiles. I think that's, this is crypto, right? So that's the antithesis of crypto ethos, to be randomly scraping people's social data without their permission. That sounds like the opposite of crypto to me. And then additionally, all this bullshit about pretending like the founder and the supporters are anonymous or having them be pseudo-anonymous. There are reasons for people to be anonymous or pseudo-anonymous, and sometimes they're very important, and I fully support that. But this isn't one of them. It felt like to pretend like you're some kind of new Satoshi Nakamoto hacker man, while at the same time you're scraping social data. It feels really wrong to me. And then additionally, keep all these gamification things where after you scrape the social data, now you're trying to get people to FOMO in on creator coins, and you're forcing people to tweet when they join BitCloud or they can't join it. And just the fact that you can get in but you can't get out. The fact that there seem to be some pretty serious issues with aspects of the code. I think it's unfortunate that a potentially brilliant and awesome idea was done in a way that is brilliant and toxic to me. And I think it's also very short-sighted. I think that there's a good chance that this will ultimately lead to the failure of the project, because there's just too much backlash from people.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. And look, I agree. It is a great idea, and I think ultimately there will be something with BitClout, but it's very hard to launch these things, and you have to try and launch them right, and hard to come back from a botched launch, which I think they had. All right, well, let's close this out, Matthew. Maybe just to finish off, I'd love to get your thoughts on, I guess, the wider crypto markets. We have really been in no man's land, as we've kind of discussed after, the Elon drama and then the China drama. So we certainly got rid of any excess leverage from the system, and maybe things are picking up just in the last day or two, but it's a little bit simplistic to say up or down, but any kind of wider thoughts on where you think we are in this cycle? Is the top in? Where do we go?
So I would phrase it thusly. I think that to some extent people are fighting the last war being 2017. I think there's a little bit of PTSD in the crypto community, where people are terrified of a repeat. But the thing is that 2017 is fundamentally different from 2021 in some really key ways. Almost the vast majority of projects in 2017 were garbage. And I think that was clear at the time, and it's even more clear in retrospect. Conversely, at the top end, the DeFi projects are very, very serious, and they're going to be enormous in the future. And so that's a fundamentally different situation. So on the top line, I think it's difficult to say if the top is already in for Bitcoin for the year. I would say we're cautiously bullish. But then if you start to, and then the second thing I would say that the market for early stage projects has been especially frothy. We definitely hope to see that calm down. And then, but the third piece, I would say that we remain extremely bullish on DeFi in the aggregate. I'm quite confident that DeFi 2 to 3 years from now will be 10x where it is now in the aggregate. And so I would say we remain extremely bullish on DeFi as a market segment. So I think there's some segmentation that you have to do.
Yeah, that makes sense, Matthew. And I'd ask you then, we haven't talked too much about Bitcoin. And, one thing that's been obvious, I suppose, in recent months is, the rest of the market really has outperformed Bitcoin. And certainly all the retail and the traders, back just looking at all the different altcoin projects. And I don't know if there's a kind of some kind of separation happening from Bitcoin and the rest of the market. But yeah, what are you still bullish on Bitcoin as well as obviously DeFi? And does Bitcoin stay the market leader?
I would say we are cautious bullish on Bitcoin. Of course, it will be the market leader for the foreseeable future, in our view. So I think that when you do have a bullish market, it's beta, right? The alts are the high beta tokens. So it's just like a high beta stock is going to go up more in a bull market than Procter and Gamble or something like that, or IBM or whatever. So it's the same thing in crypto. The more volatile stocks are going to outperform, more volatile tokens rather are going to outperform in a bull market. And we saw that on the downside as well, where they're also going to crash harder. With that said, our long-term view is that Bitcoin dominance will continue to decline. We do have that long-term view, but long-term for us is multiple years. In terms of what's going to happen 2 weeks from now or even 3 months from now, we have no view on that. We don't take a view. It's not what we do. We're not interested in doing it. And one of the reasons we're not interested in doing it is I think it's mostly a crapshoot, and we don't like to play games that are mostly decided by luck.
Yeah, fair enough, Matthew. And okay, well, last question then. You're obviously very bullish DeFi, and look, a lot of people are. And DeFi, look, it's just exciting. It's the future of France. It's the future of finance, however you want to put it. Again, this is it's another rabbit hole. But thoughts on Ethereum, I guess, as an ecosystem, or DeFi inside or outside of that. Where do you kind of see DeFi going? Look, I know this is big stuff to finish off, but just top line thoughts on how you see DeFi evolving.
So we are big holders of Ethereum. We're very bullish on, I would say, the Ethereum and Solana ecosystems, especially. Ethereum has a phenomenal moat in terms of its army of developers. And so the technology is going through some challenges as it continues to mature, but we're very, very bullish. And then Solana, the fact that there's an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude faster and cheaper in the Solana ecosystem, we think that's extraordinary. It opens up a whole new design space. So we're still seeing mostly similar applications and designs and concepts being ported over for Ethereum, which makes sense. That's the low-hanging fruit. But what we anticipate as Solana continues to mature is the advent of true innovation and differentiation, where projects will be doing things on Solana that are fundamentally not possible on other public blockchains. So that's something that we're extremely excited for. And by the way, yes. I should get back to DeFi. Solana is uniquely well suited to DeFi in our view because latency and all these extreme performance aspects are so enormously important to finance, and that's true in traditional markets, and it's definitely true in decentralized finance as well.
Fantastic. All right. Really appreciate your thoughts and your time today, Matthew. Please close it out and tell the people where they can go to find out more about Sino Global Capital. And of course, I guess your Twitter handle if people want to follow your meme adventures and interactions with SizeChad and so on.
So our website is sinoglobalcapital.com. And the company Twitter is Sino Global CAP. So then my Twitter is Matty Sino, MATTYSINO.
Brilliant. All right. All the best, Matthew. Thank you very much.
Go.
All right, there you go. That was Matthew Graham from Sino Global Capital. Always a pleasure to speak with Matthew. He's always very opinionated, very entertaining, and very knowledgeable as well. So that was great. Yeah, thanks very much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation podcast in whatever podcast app you are using, or here on YouTube if you're watching. And also special shout out to our new sponsor, Nexo. If you want to grow your wealth with the world's leading digital assets institution, Nexo, I'm sure they'd be very happy to help you out. So if you want to get involved, just go to nexo.io, which is NEXO.io. All right, that is us. We are out of here. Thanks very much, team. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin. See ya.